Hmm. Hi. Hello. Hello, people. Hello, whomever you are out there. Welcome to my office. I am about to go to a dinner for a wedding of one of my dearest friends. And we, as everything in India, runs behind time. We have a few unexpected moments, and I thought to get back on and speak to you. You can read the caption for this video to understand, but I realize that the Institute for Aliveness is very much colored by me and my own experience, very unconventional life experience. And so, even though I don't like to do this, go where it's uncomfortable, right? I thought I would tap in here and tell you a bit of my story and where this worldview came about and really how it's shaped, because it is a very, 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 very different one than most humans on Earth today. So, my story starts in a very happy way. Unlike many people's, I was given an unconditionally loving, supported, very gifted childhood, an upbringing in suburbia, middle America, with absolutely doting parents who supported me through everything and gave me every opportunity. In my early years, I think I learned to be an empath very early and take on other people's pain and kind of come into a room and make everyone happier by my presence. And that led to a lot of, I think, self-betrayal for me. So some of you can probably relate to that. By the time I was in high school, I realized really how miserable I was with this externalized condition of perfection to which I held myself accountable. And somewhere around 10th grade or so, I got a little taste of my first fuck it. And I broke through the threshold, and I was like, I don't want to play by these rules anymore. None of this is real. And for anyone just tuning in, I'm dressed like this because I'm about to go to an Indian wedding. And I'm reporting live to you from Delhi, one of the most polluted places on earth right now. But it's okay. It seems lovely for now. So anyway, there I was in high school, and I knew that I was really different than the people around me. I didn't have similar interests. I didn't have any more that desire to show up to impress anyone or do anything. I kind of just wanted to get out. I grew up in Ohio, of all places. It's a place that many films are made and set in, because it's this perfect example of that, middle America. And so I finished lots of credits to attempt to graduate high school early, and even applied to a program to have my last year of high school and my first year of college be the same. I didn't end up going to that program, but I did start taking university classes while I was still in high school on the university campus, and then I spent a part of my senior year in high school in Mexico City. And it was at that time, 17, 18, that I realized that I was kind of an expatriate, right? I hadn't maybe admitted it to myself yet, but it was coming. So then, somehow, by the ripe age of 18, I had this foresight that the last thing that I wanted to do was spend the next 4 years of my life in the US. And even though my parents had given me the most extensive college search known to man, like every weekend from the age of, 15 or something, we were going to a different university town and checking out a different school because I had the grades to be able to get into wherever I wanted. And even though it was so extensive, at the end of the day, I ended up writing a proposal for the Ohio State University, the state college or the university. It's actually the biggest university in the States, 60,000 students. that I grew up 20 minutes from it. And I never thought I would go there, but that is actually where my undergraduate degree is from, because what I did was I designed my own program. So there's a little bit of Gemini overtone in my story, and the energy of Gemini is skirting around the rules, knowing that the rules were made for you to break. And so I definitely did that in my undergraduate experience, because I spent in total less than 8 months on the Ohio State University campus, because the rest of the time I was traveling and studying abroad the whole time. So I created this entire program to study abroad every single year. And at the beginning, I had the dean of the Honors College of the Ohio State University sign off on it to say, yeah, this is okay. And once he did that, I was like, oh, that's exactly what I'm doing. I don't want to have this conventional frat house partying, sorority, U.S. experience. I felt like I didn't have time. I felt like there was something bigger to take a bite out of. And so I created this whole big program, and I studied abroad all over. I started in English-speaking countries. I went first to London and did a comparative culture program, and then I went right after that to Australia for 6 months, and that was a really formative time. I was studying a lot of humanities and Aboriginal studies. I would say those were the impactful days in anthropology that really made me an anthropologist, at the same time as I was living in a place called International House, and surrounding myself with people who came from a very different place than I did. And at that point, I think, is when I started kind of renouncing my Americanness, because I realized that if I surrounded myself by people who were completely different than me, then I could exponentiate my learning. And so I did, and my friends were from all over the world. We had great times together. That was actually the first time that I had a boyfriend. Before that, I didn't really ever have a boyfriend. I would always have flings with guys or whatever, but I wasn't that kind of girl. And so it was a very shaping experience for me at the age of 19 in Australia. After Australia, I went and lived in China, which was another hugely shaping experience, and I was teaching English in China. Hi, Daniela. And that was where I learned freedom at the age of 19 in China. I knew that as a curvy white female, that whatever I did would be considered weird. And I had actually 2 close cousins that had been living in China for years, so I had a good little insight into culture and reality there. And so my time in China was incredible, because I took the reins of whatever I do, I'm going to be weird, and I ran with it, and just was wild and free. And it was a time I was living in Shanghai pre the Olympics era. Things really changed in 2008, 2009, 2010. And so before that, Shanghai was still a cowboy town. Things were still inexpensive, and you could get whatever you wanted at any hour of the day. And so having that experience, really, it taught me freedom, and simultaneously it taught me how to withstand pain. Yeah, I remember on my way to work every morning on the metro in Shanghai having to take a running start and then going like this, and I was pinned against the glass doors of the metro on my way, and that was normal. That was normal. Thankfully, it was definitely China that prepared me for India. Excuse my use of plastic here, everyone. Welcome to countries where you rely on bottled water. Hi, Harriet. Beautiful. So I then, after China, went on to venture to South America, and in 2008 was studying in Quito, Ecuador, and that was the start of my linguistic prowess and really immersing into languages. After studying in Ecuador for a term, my brother came, and we traveled all of South America together for several months, and that was a hugely formative time as well, because my brother's been a big impact on my journey. That was around the time I had become vegan already, and he had become gluten-free way before it was cool. And we were just stepping into a place of consciousness with permaculture and living with intention. And so as we were backpacking around South America, of course, you learn so much from every South American country. I fell in love with Colombia, and realized the phrase, el único riesgo es que no is es que quedarás. The only risk is that you will stay and you won't leave. And hi, Sean. So at that point, I, by then was fluent in Spanish, and it was like another expression, an ability to express myself in another language. And so from there, I hopped directly into French. I think I had 6 hours of French lessons before I went and lived in Provence in the south of France over the summer, and was living with a family where the mother of the family was my teacher, and immersed in French, and took off that language belt of Spanish and put on the one of French and went straight in. And when you have to think in a different language, and it's like you're immediately impaired, right? Because you can't express yourself. And these people didn't speak English, right? So the first week I was speaking Spanish, full stop. Spanish with a French accent. And from there, I went on to continue learning languages. I'm trying to think of where I was that fall. I think that was when I went to India for the first time, 2008, end of 2008. And that completely changed me. By that time, I was already a yoga teacher. I had done a teacher training at The Ohio State University, but I had no idea about really what yoga was until I landed in India the first time. I thought it was a physical practice. Our morning yoga classes on this very influential program, and this was when I was 20, I arrived in India, and that was the start of my spiritual awakening. It was in Oroville, where I was studying in a community in the south of India. It's the largest intentional community in the world, and the oldest. We just celebrated our 50th anniversary almost 2 years ago. And this was a hugely transformative time for me. We were studying sustainability from every single angle. So it was self-sustainability, group sustainability, of course, environmental sustainability, workplace sustainability, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. And I was working at the Oroville Radio. I was in this intensive program called Living Roots by Daniel Greenberg. And all of this had a tremendous impact on my psyche. Before that, I had gone in as a hard-headed intellectual political economist. And I remember at the beginning of the semester having an argument with my advisor of the word I does not belong in an academic paper. There's no room for subjectivity here. And by the end of the semester, I was grading myself, as one does in these liberal arts programs, with crystals in my hands, crying, like deciding if I should get an A or an A minus. And it was that quality of transformation, and huge love to Brittany Johnson, who was my roommate during that time and who really stewarded me into a whole new worldview, a truly cosmic worldview of really understanding what yoga is. I mean, yoga means union. That's the Sanskrit root word, yuj. And it's the union between your smaller self and the greater expansive version of yourself, or between man and God, or whatever, however you want to conceptualize it. It's all the same thing. And that expansiveness, that identification with more than oneself, was the sustainable, eye-opening experience that I had, amongst many others, that semester. And the Orovillians, the people of the community, taught me so much. They really modeled living a spiritual life. And by that time, most of my best friends had been in their 40s when I was in my 20s, and I went and spent the next several years, a good 5 or 6 months of the year, in Oroville. And that was where I had most of my beginning practice in naturopathy. Hi, Manon. Manon. Je l'ai dire. Bien. So, yeah, so much went on there. I mean, being in India for the first time was also obviously an eye-opening experience, but before no time it felt natural. There was this quality about Indians, and I can say it because I'm in India now, and like I'm at this Indian wedding and I walk around and I forget that I'm not Indian. I walk around and I feel more comfortable there than I would in a situation in the United States, even though that's my culture and where I grew up. It's like this is my adopted culture, and it's not an appropriation. It's just like it speaks to my soul so much. Like my Indian friends call me a lychee, white on the outside, brown on the inside, and I literally, honest to God, forget that I'm not Indian. Like, I forget that this isn't naturally me, because the worldview and the way of relating and like the quality of just this like this implied love is so it shaped my rebirth. Like, it was the nest in which I rehatched in this lifetime. So a little emotional time with Mother India. So there's that. And yeah, I mean, this time of rebirth was hugely impactful. Like, there's so much to say. I mean, I was working at the radio, at Orville Radio. So check out orvilleradio.org. It's an incredible project. I did so many amazing projects during that time and over the next few years. It's where I was saying I originally got to craft my naturopathy practice, and I was 21 consulting people who were 60. And yet in Orville and also in India, there's this essence of, it doesn't matter how many years you've been on the planet this lifetime. What matters is what you know and what you can share, and moreover, the quality with which you share. And so, like, just such beauty to be accepted into that and to be able to practice so young. Whereas I know if I were in the West, people would be like, why are you listening to this 20-year-old, you know? But in Orville, it was supported. It was so beautiful. Hi, Betsy. So, with this, I will also say that when I left India, my next stop was Bangladesh. I was sent by the US State Department to Dhaka, Bangladesh in 2009 and Kolkata, India, West Bengal in 2010 to study Bangla. This was part of something called the Critical Languages Scholarship, which I would highly recommend that you tell to anyone who you know in a US university. That the Critical Languages Scholarship was kind of George Bush's, the second one, his realization of like can I do a U.S. Southern accent? I realized that I don't have any Americans that speak anything other than English all over the world, right? And so he then kind of wiped his bum and was like, let me change that, which I massively respect him for, because that in turn funded tremendous amounts of learning of foreign languages, crucial foreign languages. Hi, Mommy. Hi, Heather. So, with this, what happened next was when I was in Bangladesh, it kind of compounded the discomfort, the endurance of pain that I had learned first in China and then in India. And in Bangladesh, it was a whole nother level, because in Bangladesh, things are just dirty. Like, if you think of third world country, like Bangladesh is probably the dirtiest place I've ever been. The infrastructure there was like built broken. Yeah. The way things function is just dysfunctional at best. And I mean, I haven't been there in 10 years, so I can only imagine things are looking up. But even in Dhaka, like it's very, very, very undeveloped. And yeah, it was an adventure of all sorts. I had wonderful comrades on the journey, and the journey of learning Bangla was really fun, because it was by then 4th language, and it was all day, every day immersion into Bengali, into this language that had a totally foreign script. Through my yoga studies, I had access to Sanskrit, and that really helped with my Bangla, and vice versa. That by the time I was getting involved in yoga teacher trainings in 2010, so 10 years ago, it was very easy for me to help teach the Sanskrit curriculum, because Bangla is like the romantic daughter of Sanskrit, just like Italian would be to Latin. And so, yeah, I mean, it was an age, it was a time, I don't know what to say. After Bangladesh, I don't know if I can remember in order where I went next, but back and forth to India a lot, spending a lot of time in Orville. And then, take a breath, Andy. Take a breath, guys. Have some water. I was in Central America for different yoga teacher trainings. 2010. This is around the era that I got really involved in colon hydrotherapy, and I was working. I had an oceanside clinic in India. my first colonics clinic that I ran all over the world. And that was very telling. I started sharing fasting with people at that point in time. I started guiding people through fasts, I think at the age of like 22. And it's really experimental ground. I mean, there is nothing more experimental than being in clinic and having that laboratory to be able to see what's coming out of people's bodies. And it's so telling. And I would say that at that time I was probably a little more preachy than I am now. Of course, there's a coming of age with all of this, and you'll hopefully realize this in your life, that when you start to change your diet and your lifestyle and your worldview, that traditionally you go at it like, I remember telling people they were wrong, or they're going to die, or they're killing themselves. I mean, I don't think I was ever that stringent, although I was a huge environmentalist at that point, and I was very active in journalism and writing for online newspapers and things. And originally, years before that, became vegetarian for the environment, specifically. And then it was only later, when I read the China study and started studying the work of Colin T. Campbell, that I became vegan for health reasons. And then quickly thereafter, health dominated my own reasoning. But I was very hard on my parents and family members and close friends, trying to keep them accountable, because my entire mission is to empower people to realize that what you do has an effect on your body, and you are ultimately responsible for how you feel in any moment. And so my friend Janelle is here. I'll just let her in. I'm broadcasting live. Do you want to go? No, I'm okay. We go. You can sit. You can ask questions if you want again. Okay. So I'm telling a little bit of my story, which I don't usually do. And we got 2 gift bags here. You want some gifts? I'll give you gifts. Free giveaway! Giveaway right here on Andi's channel! So, after that, let's see. Where was I? We went from Bangladesh. I just started traveling, you know. Around that time I went in and out of the Emirates for the first time. Ankit's here. The party started. Ankit, I talked about being a lychee. Ankit is my friend I was just staying with in Bombay. There's like friends like family. I don't know if any of you have ever experienced that, but that's a really like super heartwarming experience that I would wish anyone to have, because when you can like be that close to an individual and their family and love them so much, it's beautiful. And that's the experience very much that I'm having here in Delhi right now at the wedding. He's laughing, crying. Yeah, I went in and out of the Emirates for the first time. I saw that kind of developed life. It was my first real experience in the Middle East besides Israel. And the travel at that point began to pick up the pace. I began to travel for sport, moreover, than study. From there, I started, as I said, traveling to Central America a lot. I spent a lot more time in Guatemala, Nicaragua. I was teaching yoga teacher trainings, and then went to my master's program. I enrolled in 2011 in a Master's of Science in Ethnobotany in the University of Kent in Canterbury, England. And I went and spent one of the coldest, most miserable seasons of my adult life there, and was immersed once again in the West when I had, spent so much of my early adulthood in Asia, and was like, oh wow, this is not the life that I want to lead. The freedom that I feel when I'm either in the tropics or when I'm surrounded by cultures that are much more open, and gotta love Brits for their humor, right? But as we know, they're not the warmest of people, and often that warmth is a facade, even though there's some beautiful British people who are like some of the most loving. At large, the culture is not one that's like, come to me, I love you, And so it was very difficult for me in many, many, many ways, as was the academia. That was a point in my life where I thought I would go into academia, and I was presenting at academic conferences and considering a PhD. And yet I was like, oh my God, these people are not applying it. They're not living it. They're just thinking about it and mentally masturbating. And so I was doing a lot of anthropology. It was under the Department of Anthropology, and yet what I was looking at was diet change over generations and the corresponding rate of disease. And so that was really the first formal interface, I would say, that I had with this quality of epidemiological awareness, of realizing that population-based illness comes from lifestyle, and that there's an implementation process and a study process that you can have academically. And so my thesis was under something called the nutrition transition, which is essentially the academic name for this transition of people going into a diet higher in processed foods like wheat, meat, sugar, animal products at large, processed foods, etc., etc. And this happened in the Western world over a period of 100 years, but in less developed parts of the world, this happened over the past 30 years only. And so it happened very, very fast, only in one generation. So the effects of that are only being seen now. And at that point in time, I was looking for another tropical place that I could, maybe settle down for a little bit. And hi Howard, how are you feeling? There's a life change from fasting. So I went to Bali for the first time, of course, after watching Eat, Pray, Love, like most do. And if you remember in Eat, Pray, Love, that there was Ketut Lair, who was the healer that homegirl, what's her name? What's her name? That Julia Roberts played, whatever her real name is. You can type it in, I forget. She went to when she was sick in Ubud. Elizabeth Gilbert, thank you. And so I went to Ubud, and I said, okay, maybe I'll do herbal medicine. And at that time, my advisor for my master's was an expert in Indonesia, of course, all of the other islands except for Bali. And so it was an excuse. It was an excuse to go to Bali. It was an excuse to see another kind of expat spiritual community that I might want to be a part of. And when I got there, I immediately realized several things: that this is a community of spiritual materialism, not actual practicing spirituality. Even though people might feel like they are, it's still a facade. There's not a lot of depth that people are reaching, and that's no fault of their own. It's simply the tone that's set by the communal agreeance of what it means, what reality is, essentially. Or what's acceptable, what they can get away with. And that there was also not really community there. And that's changed, I would say, over the years, and yet there's not intentional community still. And so I knew that within the first little bit of working there. And so what I was doing was I was full-time in my master's field research. I was so lucky. I went to the one university on an island of 5 million people, Udayana University in the south, one of the first weekends that I was in Bali. And I walked up, strutted into an anthropology classroom, and I said, hey, I'm a master's field research student here from the UK, and I'm wondering if you have any assistance that you might want to give, or if any of you want to be field research assistants. And the whole class pushed this girl out to the front, and her name was Ayu, and I got blessed with Ayu. Ayu means beauty in Balinese. I got so blessed with her beauty, and so she was my Balinese field research assistant for a long time, and some of you might have met her. I had her come and teach dance on many of my yoga teacher trainings in Bali, and she's a brilliant soul. And so we traveled all over the island. I did my master's field research interviews. By that time, I had been studying Indonesian while I was still in England. For a few hours, I learned numbers and things like that. And then within 2 weeks of being in Bali on the ground, I was semi-fluent in Indonesian. And that, I would say, is given to the fact that that was my fifth language. And once you hit 4, it's easy to learn languages because you know what questions to ask, and you know how to express yourself, how to go up towards that barrier of discomfort. But also because Indonesian's an invented language. It was invented in the 1970s during the liberation and the unification of the nation of Indonesia, and the grammar was taken largely from Bahasa Malaysian. There is very limited grammar, and it's just like a super easy functional language. So Ayu would come with me. A lot of those interviews would be in Balinese, translated back to English, and then other interviews, if she couldn't come with me out into the field, I would do in Indonesian. And incredibly enriching. I was looking at fruit and the way that fruit was used in offerings, and how that changed over the years. So that was my field research. At the same time, I had gotten roped into working at Alchemy, which some of you may have eaten at in Bali. And so way back in the day of Alchemy, when it first started with Shanti and Elena and Leisha and Anthony, there was a woman, Suki, upstairs running the colonics clinic, and she asked me to help her. And so I stood in, and lo and behold, I had key members of the community of Ubud come through my colonics clinic. And they were like, what are you doing? This is so different than what we know colonics to be. And your work is extraordinary. I would like you to stay here. And so I got, by the end of that summer, multiple jobs in Bali to stay and to work with this healing center or that one or whatever it might be. And I said no. And by the time I left, I knew I didn't want to spend more time there. Right? But there we have it. A year later, an amazing woman named Maureen brought me back to Bali to build the colonics clinic at Radiantly Alive, which I did. And I was there for about 10 days, and that's when the owner of the yoga barn called me in and said, hey, you want to do this? This could be your empire, or something like that, she said to me. And I was super young, like 25, I think, then. And it was a job that was meant for like a 45-year-old. And so I said, yeah, okay, that's too good to pass up, even though it was in this place that I knew I didn't want to spend time. And so I said, all right, I'll do it. And I moved to Bali. And I brought my partner, who's now my ex-partner, very ex-partner, past life son, with me to Bali, and had my first experience in a long cohabitated, committed relationship, which was a new experience for me. And the first year in Bali, I wouldn't have survived without him. And it was hard. I was acting as an entrepreneur within this already established brand in this new field, building the detox department and this unit, and the colonics clinic and all of it. And the first year I was working 16-hour days. So here I am working like a quasi-corporate, cutthroat job at the cross-section of medical and hospitality, which is a very difficult place to be, because medical traditionally tells you, sit down, do this, do what I say, and hospitality says, how can I serve you, what do you need? You know, so when there are people fasting, it's like, it's rough, it's not easy. And so nonetheless, I steeped in. By that time I had traveled lots of other places around the world, and travel was my norm. So it was like 8 years that I was traveling before I really settled in Bali. And then I lived in Bali permanently for 3.5 years, almost 4 years. And I was teaching yoga teacher trainings as well during that time. And guiding people through fasting retreats. And I had thousands of clients that came in, and I'm super thankful. As difficult as the experience at the yoga barn was, I am so thankful for the exposure and experience that it gave me, because it gives us this relationship today. It gave me a platform to kind of launch off of, to make the Institute for Aliveness, which is my gift to the world, and hopefully something that can long withstand my brain or interpretation of what I'm meant to do here, and that you can be a part of, because it's really here to be the revolution of the future. And to support people to take that sovereignty of health back into their own hands. And so this 18-month program that we're starting in January is the first step to having a first generation of practitioners who are going to be practicing in that sovereign way. Because even if you think of a herbalist, or you think of an Ayurvedic doctor, or whatever it is, it's still that hierarchical disempowerment where the doctor, the practitioner, has all the power and the person doesn't. And that's not what we practice here. What we practice here is fully giving back the power to the patient, whereby they shouldn't need you anymore. And it's not a great business model, right? But it's one that will be the life raft that the world needs, because humanity today is sick, and sicker than ever before, and sicker than a decade ago when I was doing my main research. Oh, our power went out. I wonder if the internet's still on. It seems like it is. Welcome to India, even in the Hyatt. The power goes out. Oh, you're so cute. She's putting a light on me. I love you, Duna. So, I'll put another flashlight on for you guys. So, yeah, I would say living in less developed countries like this definitely gave me this understanding that no matter what happens, it's okay. Whatever it is, it's okay. No matter what happens, it's okay. And that was a mantra that I used for many years, and that I gifted to hundreds of detoxers that came through the week-long experience. Because that's the truth of things at the end of the day. If you can be okay with anything that happens, and the example that I always gave was, if you walk out on the street today and get hit by a bus, if you have that level of command over your nervous system and your reality, that whatever it is, it's okay, and take a deep breath, those last few moments of life, right, they're not going to be panicking. They're going to be like full and present. And the yogic worldview is one that does understand cycles of karma and reincarnation, and the wheel of samskara, the journeys that we go through as our soul travels through different bodies and different lifetimes. It's looking beyond time as a linear entity and rather looking at it as circular and concurrent in many ways. And it's the ability to think beyond this lifetime. And so somewhere in there, when I was still in undergrad, I started studying astrology, and like most people, it was superficial at first, and then started deepening really about 10 years ago. And then I've been giving readings for the past, let's say, 5 or 6 years professionally, and really went off the deep end about 5 years ago, and just voraciously study as much as I can and use every human I meet as a little bit of a science experiment. And I'm a scientist, right? Moon in Scorpio. That quality of being able to see astrology living, that is archetypical existence. It is our way of seeing the pattern that's woven throughout all of existence and embracing it fully. So something I left out was that when in 2010, when I was in Kolkata, I started writing back and forth with what would become my alma mater for my naturopathy degree. And I did get a degree from India intentionally for my doctorate in naturopathy, because I wanted to study nature cure, which is the origin of naturopathy. I didn't want to study in the Western sense. In North America, and more or less in Oceania, what you study in your naturopathy curriculum is like Western medicine, 4 years, plus herbalism and other kinds of natural techniques. But what I studied, right, was true nature cure. So going in clinic, having mud packs, having air baths, having different forms of hydrotherapy, like steam blown on the body, using the elements to heal, fasting as a tradition. Like, this is nature cure. This is the origin of naturopathy. And that's what I wanted. And so I knew I never wanted to practice or live in the West really again. So I wasn't concerned about the fact that my degree came from India. And living in Indonesia all those years, of course, that's Indonesia, so the regulation is also not the same. And you know, there's that whole hierarchy of power of like, well, how can you call yourself a doctor? You're not a Western medicine doctor. I got that a lot. And I did definitely create very much a professional ego of Dr. Andrea Page. And a lot of that was my own personal feelings of insignificance, of being so young and having this job. You know, I was in my 20s and I had a job of someone in their 40s. And so there was a lot of I don't know how to describe it, but I guess insecurity at the end of the day that came from it. And I would try to dress older and look older because I was nervous. I knew that something somehow wasn't right for that. Oh, Teddy's on. Hi, Ted. And then I met Ted and everything went well. So Yeah, so where were we? Naturopathy degree, I finished in, I think, 2014. And then I had my years in Bali, and the Bali years were years where, it was my first real, like, job working for someone else. And soon thereafter, I realized that that wasn't for me. I went to Burning Man for the first time in 2016. And this was one of those things that I had seen, and I'm sure you guys probably have seen on Facebook the year before, and then you're like, I'm going to be there next year. I will be there next year. And so this was a commitment I made to myself, and I invite you to also make those kinds of commitments to yourself, because at the end of the day, it's you and yourself. Like, you're born alone, you die alone. And so what you do with yourself and the conversation that you have between your ears is the most important one to nourish, right? So there we have it. I dove in 2016, made it happen, went to Burning Man right before, on my way to teach a yoga teacher training in Peru. And wow. I had remembered how much I had forgotten of the connection of human beings and how good and authentic we can be. And I remember breaking down into tears in like the corner of 9 o'clock in J, like way out in the boonies in Burning Man terms, because I remembered what it was like for someone to be selfless and to say hi for no reason other than saying hi. Right? Not because they want something from you, not because they're significantly lonely, not because it's culturally appropriate to be saying hi or should. It was just out of the goodness of their heart on behalf of human connection to say hi. And I had been hustling so much in Bali, and I had forgotten that goodness of humanity. And so Burning Man gave that back to me, and I was what we call a Burning Man victim, and I went home and I quit my job. When I went back to Bali, I knew that would be my last year, even though I thought it was a 5-year plan, and I was like, okay, I can only withstand 1 more year of Yoga Disney World. I do not want to be Minnie anymore. It was a lapse in integrity. And so I made my 3-month plan, and the management was really cutthroat at that time, and untenable at best. And so I kind of packed up everything and left. And that was so liberating. That was the end of 2016. I went to my parents' house in Florida for New Year's to spend it with them, to send the message that I will see you more. That during my time in Bali, I had actually missed my first cousin's wedding because my visa was getting renewed. And so that's a reality of living abroad, of being an expat. The essence of family, right? It's like our chosen family, which we talked about before, but like birth family, you're really far away. And so I went to spend New Year's with my parents to show them that that wouldn't happen again, that I would see them more. And I have since then. I see them several times a year, even though I still live abroad. And so that was very empowering. From there, I started studying entrepreneurialism like no one's business. I had this story in my head that, hi, Krupa love. I hope to see you soon. Oh, Ted's crying. I love you, Ted. So Ted's about to have a family. Voila. Am I live on Andi X, or am I live on the Institute for Aliveness? I'm like, how are my friends watching this?
I have to check.
Okay, she has to check. She's going to check. So you guys can tell me too. So from there, let's see. I dove into entrepreneurialism. I went to Cuba for the first time. That was super fun. And I figured, you know what? This whole health career, I can do it online. I can do it on my own. I don't need this institution. Very good, thank you. Very good, we're in the right place. I love you guys. Say hi and say wherever you are. I'd really love to know. So, even if you're watching this on replay, thank you, Heather. So, from there, I went to, Danielle, I love you guys. I went to travel Central America, again, I was all over. I mean, if you haven't been to Cuba yet, you must go. That was such a reminder of fraternity. It was a similar thing of remembering the goodness of humanity in a very Anne Frank kind of way. But Cuba is one of the last places on earth that I've experienced where, you know, there's just this sense of, like, we're human together. Like, when was the last time you looked at a human and weren't having a thought of judgment or insignificance or hierarchical comparison or whatever, and you were just like, there's a human on their journey. Like, maybe you're having that with me as I'm, like, opening my heart to and crying. But, yeah, so, I'm trying to think of what I left out here, but so I quit Bali. I went into this year of entrepreneurialism. That actually brought me to Bombay for the first time. I was teaching at the International Yoga Festival in Rishikesh, and a girl came up to me after one of my lectures and said, "You have to meet my brother." And I was like, lady, I gotta meet a lot of people's brother. But she was like, no, you have to meet my brother. And actually, this, I think, was the year before that, 2016. And that's Harsh, who's getting married today, or who got married today. And I did meet him. And I came to India to start to become very involved in his project called the Vedari, which was a very similar vision of kind of transforming the future of India's health. India, of course, the country with the highest rate of diabetes, amongst other kinds of heart conditions, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. Non-communicable diseases skyrocketing because their diet is full of wheat, oil, and sugar. Full stop. I mean, even though there's so many vegetarians, they're eating tons of processed food, tons of added chemicals, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. So, yeah, bless. So the Vedari is an amazing project here. We have 2 clinics open in Bombay, and one is opening soon here in Delhi. Harsh is actually getting married, or got married today, to Subha Jain, a beautiful young woman who comes from my lineage of natural hygiene and who is one of India's most up-and-coming rising stars in online health education. And so you can check her out. Her work is called the Sattvic Movement, and she's precious. And so they're coming together to join forces on behalf of the future of India's health. And so from there, I started going in and out of Bombay more. I was starting to teach and lead fasts here and doing things all over the world. In the summer of 2017, during my year of entrepreneurialism, I was like, you know what? I want to move to Amsterdam. And I tried to move to Amsterdam, and then I was like, it's really cold here. And the Dutch people love bureaucracy. And even though that's what I wanted after so many years in Asia, it was too big of a dose. And so it kind of kicked me in the bum in the end, and I left, went back to Burning Man, and started getting involved in Burning Man speaker series. And I ran 2 years ago the speaker series for Camp to Central, and then last year I ran one for the Dr. Bronner's camp and the Zendo camp on psychedelics. And I brought together some of the biggest psychedelic researchers in the world and put on a giant conference that was highly well attended, 600 people at our max, and was a lot of work. And so my journey with Burning Man has been amazing, and my journey over the past 2 years has also been very amazing, because at the end of 2017, after the year of entrepreneurialism, about halfway through the year, I was like, wait, why am I doing this? I don't enjoy guiding people through fasting retreats like this in person at that cross-section of medical and hospitality. I don't actually want to put myself out there online as much as I have been doing. This kind of thing isn't natural for me. I mean, being in media and everything always was, because I grew up on camera, acting and modeling, but this level of like social media star of like, hi, I'm Andi. Today I'm going to tell you about like what, it's just like, no, fuck. And I always knew that there was, and I tried, like, if you can look at the videos on this page from 2017, like, I would get down and really try to bring authenticity, but I knew that the things that people looked for and created popularity in the world were, like, bums and naked girls and clickbait, and I just wasn't willing to do that and go that far, and the quality of truth that I immerse people in was a bit too intense for social media. And so in that cross section I was like, And that was around the time of my Saturn return, which you might remember in your own life from 28 and a half to 30, is a time when shit hits the fan. And shit definitely hit the fan for me. That was when I left the yoga bar, and that was when all of these different things happened. And I went off grid. And you can read about that. You can go back through the post from 2017 on this page as well. And I went into silence for 40 days. And I was off grid for 3 months, completely inactive on social media. And very few people in the world knew where I was. And I was in the countryside in South Africa, living on an apple orchard, blessed as I'll be. My dear, dear, dear friend Murray was my steward whenever I needed a voice or someone to speak on my behalf. And I started training for triathlons. And at that time, I had been practicing Ashtanga Yoga Intermediate Series, 6 days a week, super intensive 2.5 hour practice. And if anyone knows about asana, like, you know, that was like putting my legs behind my head, dropping back and catching my heels in an intense bridge pose, like very intense practice. And the ego was so deeply woven in the practice, but I didn't realize that until I left the practice itself. And so when I did end up leaving to start training for triathlon, because the first week when I was running, I had sciatic pain, and I was like, wait a minute, this doesn't make sense. The muscles on the outside of my legs are really loose. We have to go, hey?
Harsh sent a message saying that 15 minutes.
15 minutes? Okay.
Isn't like we have to be there.
Okay, so let's call the driver. I'll wrap this up. So, long story short, and thank you. I can't believe so many of you are still watching. This is amazing. I hope this is valuable to you in one way, shape, or form, because the rest of the information on this page is about health. So it's good for you to also, I guess, hear about me. So, end of the story is that I left my career. When I was in silence, I decided to leave my career, and I kind of like really pivoted, and my futurist roots were reborn. I realized that I wanted to work in AI. And so I started working with teams to program AI, to work with intelligence amplification, which is what's beyond AI. It's biodata feedback. So it's using a wearable to detect human physiology, whether it's respiratory rate, whether it's heart rate variation, whether it's skin temperature, whether it's brainwave detection, whatever it might be, to determine what your maximal state is, maximal state of functioning, and then to advise you and your life to support that maximal state. And that's what I had been doing for 10 years in my career. So the fact that I could use technology to do it was like, oh, fuck yeah. So that is still a huge forefront and big part of my work in this lifetime. And from there, I also got really involved in the decentralization movement, and still am, and that first translated as blockchain and crypto, you know, before it was cool, 2017, then it escalated and everything really went on, and also being a cultural commentator in that state and kind of keeping people accountable, because some really irresponsible, destructive old world kinds of things were happening in the crypto world as people were getting wealthy very fast. And just kind of asking the question of like, what are we really doing here? So then I started studying venture capital over the past 2 years and getting very much interested in what can happen when we invest in big ideas. And this essence of futurism still runs through my veins. And then I started doing some business consulting, because I realized when I sat down with people who had businesses, I was able to, because I have not been trained in business, my brain worked in a way where I could just jump in and give these incredible new perspectives that would take so long normally for a company to figure out on their own. And so that's been going really well, and I enjoy that so much more than anything in health, because it's like my brain gets to go into a jungle gym, whereas in my career I felt like I was repeating myself again and again and again, and that limits my own learning. So I do that stuff. I started doing emotional intelligence consulting, because when I left the yogic world, which was, again, one of the most liberating things I've ever done, and went into the corporate world effectively, I took the word consciousness and changed it into emotional intelligence. And so as soon as I was able to be teaching emotional intelligence, it was so liberating, because, again, it's the question of what's really going on here? What's really going on here? What is the conversation I'm having with myself? What is this actually about? Because it's not about whatever conflict's at hand. It's about something from childhood. Looking at trauma. Trauma came really forefront about 2 years ago in my practice. And that was after psychosomatics also took a front stage. And like getting really deep into real medicine and not just physical medicine. So all of these things have happened. And then I took the last quarter of this year to kind of start to tie up the loose ends of my health career, which I had kind of like left, you know, even though I still post on this page and still try to support you guys as the audience as much as possible. So the Institute for Aliveness, which is starting in January, is welcoming this new generation of empowered health practitioners who are going to take on this work of being accountable in the world of health. The initiation, which is the rebranding of the online fasting program, will continue, and I want to get venture capital funding to scale it large so that this will be a birthright experience akin to an ayahuasca journey or a Vipassana retreat for millennials, because not a lot of them exist. And then the fasting book, which I've just finished during my 2-week water fast last week in Thailand. So those are my big gifts to the world, that once they're done, I can go and do crazy other stuff, like start advising royal families and small country governments on preventative health and true public health, and start working at impact at a larger scale where it's not client facing. Because as much as I love you, and I've loved working with you, and like the presence that's conjured up in me by dealing with so many thousands of you, and whatever you've brought forth and how much you've taught me, it's not what I'm here for, right? I want to work with millions by being the woman behind the curtain programming the AI. And so, all right, so that leads us to today. And I gotta go to this wedding, and I love you. Thank you so much for watching. Any questions you have? I mean, there's so much I left out. There's so much other travel. There's my own experimentation with psilocybin that was really potent for me earlier this year, hiking in Brazil. Oh, my mom and Ted are loving this. I love you guys. I don't know what else to say. I'm here. I'm yours. Thank you. And go tell someone that you love them today. Like, really, tell them the things that you would never say. All right, that's my assignment.